Pets look like their owners, and cars reflect the owner's personality. What does a half-frame SLR dressed as a rangefinder say about the owner? This is a 1969 Olympus PEN-FT with a 40mm f1.4 lens that I bought used with a broken self-timer. Thanks a lot, KEH. I don't think I've ever seen anyone using one of these in person. But if I did, I'd think, there's a person who doesn't need anything more. There's a person who gets all their clothing from outlet stores right before the new seasonal line comes in. They drive a sensible, oldish Japanese car and do the basic amount of maintenance. Or they are a YouTuber making camera reviews. This camera was made from 1966 to 1972. This was the successor to the PEN-F. There was the PEN, PEN-S, along with various PEN-Ds, double E's, EM, and a PEN-wide camera before the PEN-F line. There are 18 lenses available for the PEN-F system. I only have the 40mm f1.4, but you can adapt other lenses to it. Olympus OM lenses are very popular. Olympus sold about 17 million of the PEN-F cameras, so you'll probably see a lot of photos from the 70s taken with these. Olympus reintroduced the PEN camera line in the digital format back in 2009. Half frame is 18 by 24 millimeters and is close to the Super 35 frame size, larger than Micro Four Thirds and close-ish to the APS-C sensor size. Because of this, you get about 72 frames out of a 36 frame roll. This camera is almost the exact same size as the Fuji X100 series, just a hair heavier at 600 grams with a lens. For reference, a Leica M4 weighs 560 grams, the same this weighs without a lens. The placement for everything seems very well thought out. The shutter button is flush with the body, and I've never accidentally pressed it or missed it when taking a photo. The film speed setting window is built into the shutter speed dial, like most cameras of the era. I'm sure the self-timer would work great if mine wasn't broken. The aperture rings have nice clicks that won't be easily changed accidentally. I'm not a fan of the vertical or portrait style format, but with this camera I shoot 90% of it like that. I wonder if the younger generation that is used to this ratio, with everything shot on smartphones, will take to something like this with no issue. Holding the camera normal lengthwise, the viewfinder is in the vertical ratio with EV metering numbers along the left side. People sometimes say having a smaller camera is better with subjects, because it lets you connect on a person-to-person basis better, less gear in between the photographer and the subject, I guess. Other than some point-and-shoots, this is in a pretty small weight class. If you get the 38mm f2.8 pancake lens, you could stuff this into a lot of pants and jackets. You should be able to pick one of these up with a lens for around $200 US. Prices seem to range from low 100s to $300 range. When this camera was released in 1966, it came with standard accessories like lens filters, lens hoods, a side flash that mounted via tripod screw mount, an accessory cold shoe, case, bellows attachment, and a few others. The 40mm lens has the standard f-stop numbers, but adds EV meter numbers on the other side. So if you don't want to do the mental math, or using the built-in light meter, just switch to the through the lens number, and it will be a little more straightforward. Also worth noting that this 40mm lens is equivalent to a 58mm lens on a full-frame camera. So with this system, the 42mm f1.2 lens becomes almost a 63mm f1.8 lens equivalent. People complain about a loud shutter, and while it's not as quiet as a Leica, I really don't find it to be a real-world issue unless you're using it as a spy camera. Since the light meter is battery powered, finding a battery for this isn't difficult, but more difficult than many other cameras. The best one I found is the Wine Zinc Air PX625, or a standard Duracell LR44 battery, which since that's a 1.5 volt and not the 1.35 volt this camera needs, there are people reporting that it overexposes a bit. I used an LR44 to make sure the light meter was working, but don't ever use it when taking photos. I just stick with the Sunny 16 rule. This camera is just plain fun to shoot with. A great weight, almost a little too small, maybe better for people with smaller hands. The black texture isn't good or bad. It isn't really grippy, but it's better than plain or soft plastic. Holding it can be a little awkward, but I find if you just always keep two fingers on the lens and the other on the body, or both hands gripping the edges, it's not an issue. This is the type of camera you want to just take with you everywhere. It's so small and fun, why wouldn't you? One negative I have is my ISO speed setting window only goes from 25 to 400. I guess this isn't a problem if just using the Sunny 16 rule, and since the shutter only goes to 500, you might want to take some filters. I already have many 35mm cameras and a few different medium format cameras, so there really isn't a need for me to keep this camera. But it's just too much fun to get rid of, honestly. A half-frame camera is more than just a party trick. It's a way to slice up what you see into little bits and choose to make a few quick series of shots, or just keep them separate as its own story. You can of course just crop your digital photos to get the half-frame look, but I think it's the fact that this camera forces you to shoot like that will inspire people. In a world where everyone would rather fix it in post, it's sometimes better to just work on getting it right the first time.